Hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome to the first in this series, of Communication Mastery 101 Live. Having difficult conversations as leaders is our first topic for today. Isn't it a great day to be alive? This is something that one of my coaches actually says. Today, we're going to cover this topic, which I've been thinking a lot about during these past few years. About having those difficult conversations that some of us as leaders have. And these are conversations that you would have with your team, with your peers, maybe with your senior management, perhaps within your company. And they're difficult for a reason. Let me tell you a story. I was once on a plane. It's a rather small plane, 30 people on that plane. It's quite a small plane, as I said. And we're traveling all the way from Boston, all the way through to a place called Portland, Maine, in the northeast of the USA. Half an hour flight. And halfway through that flight, there was an announcement. An announcement came from the pilot. And that pilot said, "We've got a technical issue. We're unable to disengage our undercarriage." If you know what an undercarriage is of a plane, it's basically the part that disengages, allows the wheels, allows the plane to land safely. The plane needs wheels, right? And that plane was in difficulty. They couldn't disengage the undercarriage. So I'm sat in front of basically my furthest front seat. The actual attendant, flight attendant, was sat pretty much right in front of me, just over arm's length away from me. And she then started an announcement as well. And she said, "You may have heard this. You heard what the pilot said. We've got an emergency. And if I give the command easy Victor, it basically means evacuate. Come right in front and then come out through the side." Now, at this point in time, I was a bit bewildered. I thought, what's going on? Did I hear that correctly? What's going on? And then the flight attendant, what did she do? She turned behind her. There was a shelf, some sort of shelves, opened the cupboard and brought out this big red file like I'm holding here, and started then to flick through it very quickly, frantically. And then she put it back. Now, what do you think was going on in my mind at that point in time? Maybe you can let me know if you got in the comments, if you're on, what was going on. And interestingly, we later went on with the flight. We turned back, in fact, back to the main airport that we started off from. And we landed safely because the problem had been rectified and we were able to land. Now, I think of as well, these difficult conversations are a bit like that situation where if you are on the receiving end of that conversation, you know what's going on inside. How are you feeling? To tell you the truth, you know that there's that painting, the painting by Edward Munch, and the figure in the portrait is going like this. You may have even seen the emoji for that. It's called The Scream, I believe. A very well-known painting. And that's how I was feeling inside. And the flight attendant, I imagine she was probably feeling that too at that time, because she was very worried. Did I say the right thing? Did I say everything I needed to say? How do we get out of this? And I think difficult conversations that we have can be a bit like that. If you are the leader who is going to lead that conversation, how are you going to ensure that you get to the other side with yourself intact and as well the other person that you're trying to help get through it as well safely? I'd like to ask you, who those of you who join us today, I'd like you to put in the chat, tell me what is a difficult conversation that you have encountered or that you've had. Let me know. Let me see if I can. Let me see what your comments are. What are the difficult conversations that you've come across that maybe you've had to lead or you have been a part of? You can see the comments coming through. Okay. So as you're coming up with those examples, some of those conversations that you may find difficult, whether you are leading those or you are on the receiving end of those. Some I come across are, for example, when you have identified a particular problem or the behavior of maybe your team member, and you want to give them some feedback to help them to realize that there is a problem and how to move forward with it, maybe to even correct or maybe to help them to realize and then to make a change. Another type of challenge could be as well, maybe you're having to run an appraisal, right? Appraisal or performance review, however you want to call it, with a team member. How would you navigate that? How would you lead them through? And another example could be, well, you're going to have that difficult conversation as a leader where you're going to have to tell somebody that they're going to have to be let go. They're going to have to be made redundant. Difficult conversations, I'm sure you'll agree. I think if we are in a situation where we don't know what we're meant to say, and we're hoping that the other person doesn't realize that we are unsure as to what to say, I think that can be pretty difficult, don't you think? And yeah, I like what you said there, Michael. Thanks. How would you deliver tough messages? Yeah, that's a good question that is often asked. I mean, indeed, an interview as well could be a tough or difficult conversation, or it shouldn't be, but it can often be. And yeah, a conversation could be where you are being, you as the leader are having to share or deliver a message that may not be a great message for the persons that are affected. Maybe a team are being laid off, or maybe yourself, your own role is going to be replaced, or you're moving on. Whatever it is, having that can be quite a challenge. Great. So types of difficult conversation you encounter, I think it is an important topic. And what I like to move on then to is to explore a bit about what makes those particular conversations difficult. Let me know in the chat. I want to sort of see your comments, your engagement, because I want to make this as much of a conversation as much as possible. I know I'm speaking through to you here on this webinar, and I can't hear you. However, I want to make it as conversational as I can, because at the end of the day, in order for me to help you as best I can, I want to make this more of a conversation rather than me just lecturing. So great. So what makes these particular conversations difficult? Be it telling somebody they're going to be laid off, be it that you want them to adjust their behavior in some way. You're giving some feedback, you're running an appraisal. What are the challenges? What makes those conversations, those difficult conversations, difficult? Enter into chat. Let me know what makes them difficult. I appreciate this is quite a difficult question to answer. If you're finding it difficult, that's perfectly fine because it takes a little bit of more, maybe it's a self-awareness to develop in yourself to be able to realize what actually makes it very difficult. So tell me, what makes these difficult conversations especially difficult for you? Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I'm sure it is out. I think you make a good point there, Michael, that it's perhaps out of the comfort zone of most people, and it's maybe a conversation that you probably have inside that what really makes it difficult. So let me share. For me, what makes a difficult conversation difficult, and I'm sure probably it is as well with yourselves, is it's I'd say it is the fear. It is fear, and there's nothing wrong with fear. We all have some sort of fear. I think it's a fear of a number of different things. It could be the fear of what the other person is thinking or feeling, the fear that you might trigger that other person to be emotional. It could be as well a fear that you're going to be judged on terms of how you're performing in that particular conversation. You're you're being judged perhaps on how you are perceiving that person. So there's a lot of different things, and I think it's fear is fundamental to it. Uh, I think perhaps for a lot of people, perhaps it may not be so easy to admit that fear is at the heart of it. But I think fear is there. I feel that fear is there. And there's nothing wrong with it. Fear is definitely there. And why does fear happen? Fear happens because we're uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen, what is going to happen next, how we're going to get through something because we can't see it, or we're perhaps going to be worried that we might end up as well getting emotional because it's going to be very hard to have a difficult conversation that you need to have or you feel you need to have if you are getting very emotional. I think it's a big challenge. And I just reading a comment here. Thanks, Michael. You're saying that it's difficult in the way that you could be in a situation where you might not agree with the message but have to follow the company line. Absolutely, particularly when a lot of the messages or the initiatives that are coming to you, you've had very minimal engagement in. You may have just been given the role of passing that message on, be it to sort of let the team that there's going to be big changes, and that is a difficult conversation. It's difficult for the receiver. It's difficult for you as, dare I say, the messenger, and to actually share that in a way that helps them, whilst it helping them in the best way, is not necessarily particularly easy. I get that absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Michael. Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's fear that's at the heart of it, or the emotions, rather, how someone would take something. You perhaps to be a bit wary if someone came up, if in that difficult conversation, let's say they've just received news from you that they're going to be made redundant, they're not going to say, "Oh, that's great." I mean, that's overemphasizing a little bit. That's over it, but they're not going to respond in that way. They might even respond in a way like, they might not even be able to say anything because they're feeling something. They're feeling in a very emotional way. They could be then trying to articulate that, or what does that mean for them? They're asking themselves lots of questions, and I think that can be quite a difficult thing for them to handle. It's going to be difficult for you to handle as a leader in being there. So where does this leave us? We know it's difficult. We know that we're going to feel fear in that situation. We know they are going to perhaps feel fear. They're going to feel fear on how, the judgment aspect, how you're going to view it, how they're going to view it. So it becomes really difficult. So what's then, how do you better lead? How do you lead these types of conversations so that you can become a more, lead a conversation as an effective leader, right? How do you do that? What do you think are some ways that you can prepare for these types of difficult conversations? Let me see some comments in the chat. What do you actually do? What can you do to be able to be handling these difficult conversations more effectively? Enter in the chat, please. Let me see. Because what's the intention here? The intention is that be able to handle these types of difficult conversations more effectively in the future. So you're not feeling like this inside, right? You're not feeling scared. You're not even feeling as well that you want to avoid, or you're not actively avoiding these types of conversations or these opportunities, that you're not turning down opportunities to have those difficult conversations. And let's face it, if you're a leader, it's not on to you just to do the easy things. It's also for you to actually do the difficult things, not because they're difficult necessarily, but because they needed to be done. That you need to have those types of conversations to get to resolve a particular issue or challenge, and then to be able to move forward. And importantly as well, to actually come out of that conversation in the best way you can. Okay. So no more comments at the moment. So what I'm going to say then, I'm going to share. So importantly, hopefully you're thinking about this. Let me share some ideas of what you could do. Now, how do you lead these difficult conversations as an effective leader? I mentioned it very briefly earlier. It's important to prepare. Okay. You've got to prepare. What does that mean? That means that whatever the topic of that particular difficult conversation, you're prepared, you know some of the facts and figures that you may need to refer to. You may need to refer to and be familiar with perhaps the guidelines and rules. I mean, think back to that story I shared with the flight attendant. Quickly went back and reached out for that big red folder with all the rules and SOPs, the standard operating procedures and things. Make sure you know that properly. Okay. Make sure you're abiding by the rules, the expectations. So preparation is key. And that preparation, I'd say as well, is that you prepare yourself mentally, I say physically as well, because if you're going to be having a difficult conversation, you need to be in the best state you can be. Okay. At a time when you are feeling fresh, where possible, you've got, you're hydrated, got some water here, you're hydrated, and you also, as well, you hopefully can help the other person, ensure the other person is at a good state too, that they're prepared, maybe set expectations of what that conversation is going to be about, or it's going to be a difficult topic, but at least give them some sort of preparation up front. So that's preparation. The second point I would say, is ensure that there is a safe environment. And what do I mean? I mean a psychologically safe environment. That means that you set the expectation with yourself and with the person you're going to speak to, that it's going to be a safe space. Now, what do I mean by a safe space? I mean psychologically safe. I mean, there's going to be three things I think of. One is that there's going to be no judgment. I know that we as human beings tend to judge, but in this particular setting, in that particular conversation, that you commit to no judgment, and you ask as well, that's important. Secondly, I'd say is that there are no repercussions. Okay, that whatever is the topic of conversation, it's important that everything that's discussed in that call or that meeting is contained within it, and that is all for the purpose of helping that person get through that conversation. Okay. So no repercussion, and nothing will come back to actually hurt them. And the other third thing is is unconditional acceptance, that you accept that person for the person they are, irrespective of whatever job they do, whatever their performance, whatever they've done before, that sort of thing. But accept that person for who they are. And I'd say as well that you're accepting yourself, so you are in that moment. So those are three things I'd say are all a part of being in that safe environment that you set up, so then you can have that difficult conversation under the best conditions. And then in that conversation, the third thing I say is about having that clear communication. Whatever the message is that you need to share, it needs to be shared. It needs to be given to that person, assuming that they're the right person to actually receive that message. It affects them. They have a role to play. They're impacted. Whatever it is, make sure your conversation is clear and concise. Use your statements like I speak from I have this message to convey, and it's personal. It's you passing the message, not that it's some sort of message that you've just forwarded from someone else. That you are holding that message and sharing that, giving it to that person to help, and something that you have to do, right? A difficult message. I know Michael said about, like that maybe it's the company line, you're having to tell, well, this is what's happening, right? Imagine, for example, a bit like in the where I talked about the story of this being on this flight, that message that was received was passed on from, say, it was the pilot. The pilot had the message about the plane having difficulties. The flight attendant was the person who had to give some instructions and pass it to me as a passenger. So they were effectively, that flight attendant was setting an expectation of what they needed me to do in the case of a particular emergency. So, clear message. If that particular flight attendant didn't give me a clear instruction of what to do at the command or the instruction of Easy Victor to evacuate, well, that would have been a big problem. So that's third was clear communication. So first was preparation. Second was safe environment. The third was clear communication. Now, the fourth one is to listen. And I don't just mean listen as in hearing using the ears, but I mean listen actively. Use the whole body to actually listen, engage with that person. You've delivered the message to them. Hear, listen to what their response is. Now, appreciate, of course, that it's going to be difficult for them, for your team member, whoever is receiving that message. It's going to be difficult for them to handle whatever they've heard, particularly if it's a difficult, challenging piece of news. So listen for that. They're going to probably feel quite emotional because naturally we react emotionally. And then it's whether they're able to, often we may not be able to contain it and we have to express it. And if they don't have difficulty expressing it, well, it's a case of wanting, well, understanding, seeking to understand what is it that they are feeling. And if you listen actively, what does that mean? That means you're showing empathy. And empathy is very important when it comes to managing or handling difficult conversations with your leaders, with the team as a leader. So listening actively, there's a case of then the fifth thing is to manage the emotions, manage your own emotions clearly, but also to be in tune with what that other person is feeling and trying to help them as well understand and help them to feel understood, supported, and that they feel as well that you get or you understand what emotion they're feeling or how they're feeling, because particularly it's very difficult. And then the next feature, the next step, I'd say, is to focus on the way forward. You're in a situation, you met them, not from where you are, but you met them where they are. That's an important point. You met them where they are, and you thought, what's the way forward? To help them to feel supported, help them to manage or lead themselves through that difficult conversation to move forward. And then to agree on the next steps. Okay. What does that next step mean? It could be, for example, I don't know, it could be to uh, maybe to speak to somebody, maybe to make a change to a schedule, whatever it is. It's about making an agreement that you both agree upon, but hopefully one that is suggested or that is proposed by the other person who's received the message on how to move forward. And the last thing I would say is agree as well on a follow up. What's a follow up conversation going to be? So if if that particular person has received some very tough news, then rather than just simply just supporting them within the context of that one meeting, is to actually agree on a time, maybe in a week or so, a few days time, whatever that is, to actually say, well, to recheck in with that person and just to help them feel as well supported, and also that I think I would say is doing your role to help lead them through a difficult time. So to recap, it's about preparation, then ensuring that safe environment, communicating clearly, then listening actively, managing the emotions, focusing on the way forward, an agreement on the way forward, and follow up. So these are some key, I'd say, steps or principles that I would recommend that you would try out for how to handle those difficult conversations as a leader. And let me know in the comments what you think, what your thoughts you have. Does this make sense? Hopefully it does. What would you maybe do differently? How could you make this your own? How could you really ensure that this really works more effectively for the types of conversations, those difficult conversations that you have as a leader? And maybe in closing, I'd like to ask if there's any questions, let me know on what I've shared. And in the meantime, I'd suggest some other things as well, like make sure you don't lecture, that you don't do your monologue and just tell them what it is that you need them to know, but without even listening. Ensure it's a conversation, a dialogue between you and them to help them to understand the message, understand as well what the implications are, and help them to understand or to realize what they can do. It's almost like you're coaching them to help them through a difficult time. I think that's what an effective leader can do. So don't lecture. It's all about convincing them as well. Make sure that you are not being distracted. Another point I would say is don't make assumptions. Don't assume that just because you think the news that they were going to receive is going to be, they're going to react in a certain way. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume that they, what they're thinking. That's particularly important. So we've covered 3 key things today. We've talked about the types of difficult conversations that as a leader that you encounter. And then we sort of talked about what makes a difficult conversation difficult. And then we went on into how we can then lead difficult conversations effectively as a leader. And so I'd like to invite you to, if this is something that resonates with you, if something that you like here, that you feel, hang on, these types of things, these types of conversations are something I need to get better at, I need to help my team, etc., then please reach out to me, send me a DM here on LinkedIn to say, we can have a strategy call. This is a 60-minute call where we discuss what your priorities can be, how to actually become effective as a leader, in particularly these types of communication situations. So with that, I thank you, and I'd like to leave you with a quick quote from Maya Angelou, and it's about People will forget what you do, people will forget what you say, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Thank you. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you soon. Take care.